reasonable under the circumstances. In a brief review, an agenda item was submitted and discussed before the board to distribute emergency ERA funding on the last March 22nd BOC meeting. However, the funds were not received, and the board decided it was more prudent to delay the acceptance and distribution of the funds until the funds were received. Consequently, the item was pulled, and it was agreed that the board to schedule a special called meeting as soon as practical after the funds were received. Likewise, the second item on today's agenda was presented during the BOC's March 22nd agenda book and was inadvertently missed for a vote. The ERA funds were received after that meeting on Friday, March 25th. The county immediately reached out to the rental assistance providers to finalize MOUs for further distribution. The county amended the agreement with WFN for monitoring of the new funds. In the meantime, the county clerk reached out to the commissioners for available times for the meeting. As soon as it was determined that the vendor agreements could be ready and the commissioners were available for a Wednesday 10 a.m. meeting, notice was immediately provided and the county website posted the meeting. Consequently, as previously stated, pursuant to OCGA 50-14-1, D3, special circumstances exist to call this meeting, and the notice provided was reasonable under the circumstances. I ask this to be recorded in the minutes, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Bill. I appreciate that. With that, we'll turn to our first agenda item. And Dr. McMorris, would you like me to present this, or will you be presenting this?
Actually, I was going to ask
Either one of those two.
Yes, I was going to ask our CFO and our Deputy County Attorney to present this item, Madam Chair.
Very good. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Debbie Blair with the County Attorney's Office. The agenda item number 1 that's before you is for the acceptance and allocation of the ERA1 funds that were reallocated from DCA. The board approved the request for the reallocation back in the end of January, and the $40 million has since been deposited into our account. If you recall, these funds that are allocated or reallocated are ERA1 funds, which will require a COVID hardship. To date, we have expended all of our ERA1 funds in the amount of approximately $22.8 million. The funds that we're receiving will be, of course, on the same guidelines that the current ERA1 funds are. So everything, the same documentation requirements apply, that kind of thing. The service providers have changed since the last reallocation or the last award. We are no longer, for various reasons, Star C has elected not to participate. So the providers that we are allocating to are Home Free, Must Ministries, the Center for Family Resources, and Sweetwater Mission. The agenda item before you awards $6.3 million to each of the providers along with the fees, and that leaves approximately 12 mil. It leaves a contingency, whatever 28 minus 40 is. I apologize. About 12 million in a contingency fund, such that as the providers use up the original 6.3 allocation, then we can allocate additional funds to the providers as they need them. The agenda item also asks that the allocation power be delegated to the county manager so that we don't have to come back before the board for each allocation. The agenda item also provides, as with our prior allocations, that the reimbursements are handled through WFN. There is one change to the WFN amendment that is in the packet that you have before you, and that is that they're still only going to be paid the 2%, which they received previously with our ERA1 funds, but it does allow for a $250 or $50,000 advance, which their invoices will be, applied to that advance until that is exhausted, and then they will be paid per their monthly invoices. With that, I ask that you approve the agenda item before you with the one change to the WFN amendment that I've just discussed.
Thank you. So moved as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
And I think I saw your hand, Commissioner.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask one question.
Sure.
What happens with unused funds?
The unused funds, this allocation needs to be dispersed by December 29th of this year. Anything that is not dispersed will be subject to recapture by the Treasury.
Thank you.
Very good. Commissioner Burrow, then Commissioner Sheffield.
Thank you. Thanks for the explanation. Also, the contingency that we're holding,
Yes.
is that in case one of the 4 providers uses their 6.3 and needs additional with approved applications that qualify and all that?
That's correct. What we discovered through the last year with the ERA, some of the providers use the funds. I mean, Home Free with an online portal has a little more access, so they are able to process a lot more applications, and therefore they use funds a little bit quicker than some of the more local folks. So rather than allocate it all out and have to pull money back from one of those providers, we made the decision, or we're asking for the decision to be made, that we just allocate a portion of it such that we can just get those monies out to the service provider that needs additional funding as it's needed.
And all the 40 million has to be dispersed by the end of December this year?
December 29th, yes.
And they're all the same requirements and qualifications as ERA 1?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Sheffield.
Thanks, Debbie. Will there be an additional administrative fee for the transfer of the contingency funds?
No, it'll be also at the 2%. So everything that's distributed, the service providers are, and again, we're using numbers from the original ERA 1 when we distributed that back in 2021. The service providers will receive an administrative fee of 8% of the monies that they expend, and then WFN will receive a 2% administrative fee for the monies that the service providers expend. So the program itself does not allow for more than 10% being used for admin. So that's why we're on those two numbers. That's where we landed last year.
Thanks.
Commissioner Gamble, did you have any questions? Okay.
So Debbie and Bill, I'm not sure if you're going to be able to answer these. So these are ERA 1 funds,
Yes.
but the providers that we're giving this to, we're doing the ERA 2 funds, correct?
Yes, but the providers, we don't have any ERA 1 funds now. All of our original ERA 1 funds have been expended. As you know, we are waiting for ERA 2 funds, which were deposited in our account this morning. That's not before us today. So to the extent that during the course of 2021, we had ERA 1 funds available and ERA 2 funds available, the same service providers were doing both 1 and 2. The monies before you today are simply ERA 1.
So where I'm struggling is if ERA 1 was finalized and finished, and they've only been accepting under ERA 2, have they been, and ERA 2 did not require the proof of the COVID hardship, are they having to go back and ask for the proof of COVID hardship in order to award the funds under this document? Because this allows you to go back to March 13th of 2020 to claim for funds, but if we have a cap that you can only go back for 15 months, we're 2 years out. There's still going to be a 9-month gap. How is that going to prevent them from being evicted?
So these funds will have to, any applicants will have to show a COVID hardship to receive ERA 1 funds out of this allocation. The service providers, when they ran out of funds, stopped taking applications, which, except for one, which I have shared with you previously. So right now, there are no pending applications that the providers have.
For ERA 1 or ERA 2?
Both.
Okay.
A CFR has a few applications that they're working through magistrate court, but that's ERA 2 money right now. So to your point, there will have to be a COVID hardship shown, and the maximum amount of monthly assistance that you can receive under ERA 1 is 15 months. That's not to say that we have to go back to March 15th. It could be that somebody got COVID and lost their job, or they had a medical hardship because of COVID, and that occurred in December. So they would have a COVID hardship and be eligible for assistance under ERA 1 because they can show that there was some hardship related to COVID. It doesn't have to have occurred in March of 2020. Is that clear?
It does, but just going back that far, I didn't know, how it was going to go, knowing that we had open applications that hadn't been filled back when the ERA 1 finished
And
the
we
first
don't
time.
have any open applications
Okay.
right now with the providers.
Okay. That's all my questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. Do commissioners have any other questions? All right. We had a motion and a second. I'll call the question. The motion passes 4-1 with Commissioner Gambrill in opposition. Thank you,
Thank
Debbie.
you.
Thank you, Bill. We have one more item on today's agenda, which is under DOT, and we'll have that item presented by our DOT Director, and that's on page 11.
Good morning, Chairwoman, Commissioners, Drew Ressler, Cobb DOT. My apologies for the mix-up on March 22nd. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to get this item into this meeting to allow staff time to be able to complete all of the application processes for this application. The raise applications are due on April 14th. So this item will allow staff sufficient time to be able to get the applications finalized and in and confirmed well in advance of that deadline. The other two we did sort out, but this third one is to recommend the Board of Commissioners adopt a resolution authorizing the submission of a Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity, RAISE, grant application to the U.S. Department of Transportation for the Cumberland Core Loop, also known as Cumberland Sweep Planning Project. Designate Lorraine Vance and Drew Ressler as the authorized department representatives for all matters associated with the RAISE grant application, and authorize the chairwoman to execute the necessary documents.
All right, Commissioner Richardson.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? I'll call the question. The motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
you. Seeing that that's our last agenda item, our meeting is now concluded at 10:14 a.m. Thank you and have a great rest of your morning.